Well, this is kind of a book review and kind of an intro to a new playlist that I just created here on the YouTubes for books pertaining to hypnosis, propaganda, and just media studies in general, because this is one of those areas I was going through some of the playlists, trying to update some of the content to the playlists I've set up, and I remembered this book. And this is one I reviewed a while back, but I thought this is a good intro to a playlist about propaganda, hypnosis, and all the things. And eventually, who knows, I might break that down into 3 separate playlists because I've got enough information for it to be, but I really think that those should really be kind of viewed as the same topic. Propaganda, media studies, and hypnosis really all overlap significantly. And this is one of the very first books I ever got about hypnosis. And I found this at Half Price Books. And funny thing, I have a second copy around here that's actually my original copy that's somewhere around here. And because I couldn't find it, I was in Half Price Books the other day in Oklahoma City and picked up another copy. So now I have 2 of these. But this book, this is How to Hypnotize Yourself and Others, Techniques for Solving Over 350 Problems from Quitting Smoking to Curing Insomnia by Rachel Copeland. And this is a pretty basic book. And this is one there's a lot of copies of this out there. Usually when I'm looking through a hypnosis section at used bookstores, this one is almost always in there. And this is one that don't overlook it just because it is readily available, because it actually has some pretty good stuff about more the kind of mind science aspect of hypnosis. And one of the things I remember that really sucked me into this book when I first read it in, I believe, 2007 was when I got this. And I'm just going to read this. This is Habits and Hidden Hypnosis. This is the very beginning of the book. And of course, it is dog-eared per the prophecy here. And I just say that out of habit. There's actually no prophecy pertaining to this section, but it's a funny joke to say that. We have all been secretly hypnotized. Yes, you have too. Unless you are one of the rare individuals who has never watched a television program, people drift into a common everyday trance when they gaze into the light of the TV tube. Indirect hypnosis manipulates the minds of millions of unsuspecting viewers every day. Surreptitiously, subliminal persuasion leaves its mark upon the collective subconscious. Ideas implanted by commercials affect the health and behavior of us all. We eat, drink, dress, and make love based on what we see and hear. Television has the power to lull the mind into a state of exaggerated suggestibility, opening it up to behavior control from the outside. Billions of dollars are spent each year in the United States to push products we would live better without. Intelligence notwithstanding, we allow ourselves to be coerced into consuming products dumb animals would run from. Sleep inducers, fat reducers, uppers, downers, painkillers for every part of the body. TV, in fact, can train the brain to anticipate pain even when you feel fine. Advertisers are well aware of the basic principles of hypnosis. 1, relaxation. 2, concentration. 3, suggestion. It's simple. As we sit relaxed and concentrate on the light, we absorb the suggestions directed at us. During such periods, we are extremely vulnerable because we enter a hypnotic state of consciousness, alpha. Have you ever noticed how often a commercial is repeated? This is another principle of hypnosis. Repetition enforces suggestion and finally engraves the behavior into the reflexes of the nervous system. The dictionary defines habit this way, quote, an act or practice so frequently repeated as to become relatively fixed in character and almost automatic in performance, end quote. And she goes on to talk more at length about how advertising and hypnosis work together, how that is very much a principle of modern advertising. And there's one more section I want to get into here in a second, but the reason I thought about this again, because one of my kids this morning was brought up hypnosis and how my daughter, who just graduated with a psych degree, we were talking about hypnotic stuff related to that. And she was talking about how she wanted to look into it more because there's an effort to kind of play that off as some kind of quackery, that hypnosis is kind of a nothing burger and don't even bother with it. And as I was telling her this morning when we were discussing this, it's, as the author mentions here, and of course this is a fairly old book. This is from 1981. So 44 years ago, this author was talking about the billions of dollars spent on advertising and using these hypnotic techniques, and they wouldn't spend a nickel of that if it wasn't effective. And another good example of that is like polygraph tests, which are often shot down as like, oh, that's kind of quackery. And yet, most people, if you talk to anyone who's worked in a high security job or in a Fortune 500 company job where they had to be vetted for that job, all of those use polygraph tests to great extent. Just like they use Enneagram testing and things like that to get a good look at someone's general makeup of their personality. So to me, that's the real tell right there, is publicly, the public side of it is, no, hypnosis and polygraphs and all that's some kind of crazy quackery. But when the rubber meets the road, these guys all use it extensively. So I think that's an important thing to remember when we're looking at things related to hypnosis. And in my personal studies, I've noticed there's a wealth of hypnotic information and information on propaganda and propaganda techniques and things around the beginning of the 20th century. And sometime around the 50s into the 60s, hypnosis and related mind sciences kind of went black. And then it became taboo going into the 80s and 90s, that by really the time I was in college, you heard there was all kinds of efforts to discredit hypnosis in all forms. And I know a lot of people that I used to work at a shop, a magic shop, and we actually had several professional hypnotists come in, and that was my first exposure to it. It told me some wild stories of stuff they would do on stage that blew my mind. And they weren't even telling this to me as like crazy stories. They were just relating some parts of their act that I was like, did not know that was possible, about pushing needles through parts of their face, parts of a subject's face under hypnosis and things like that. And some of the same people in those same circles that knew exactly the same people that I did would also tell me almost in the same breath as somebody had said that, they would say, well, yeah, but that's all fakery. That's all just people acting. So anyway, I think it's really important to understand, especially, again, this book is from 1981, and it's interesting how open people were 40, 50, 60 years ago about hypnosis and advertising and hypnosis and propaganda all being kind of one and the same. And then now you have an effort to really shoot that down. And one thing, I personally grew up without a television. I didn't have a TV around readily available until I was really late in my college years and well into my 20s. So as a result, I was very conscious of that when I would visit friends' house. My parents weren't like hardliners of, you're not going to watch TV ever. It was my grandparents had TVs, my aunts and uncles had TVs. We were the weird family that didn't have a TV. And my parents would give alternating explanations for that depending on who the audience was about. For one thing, it was an economic thing of, 5 kids. They weren't going to have 5 kids fighting over television. But the more serious explanation that they gave us when we got older was about I have adopted siblings that are very obviously from another country, not the United States. And they were adopted in an era when that was very much taboo. And there was a lot of Asian children on TV getting blown up with napalm and whatnot. So my parents decided early on, back in the late 60s, early 70s, they were like, you know what? We're not going to have a television set in our house showing, people's very negative attitudes about Asians right now while we're raising Asian children. So, and then it just kind of stuck from there. And that was one of the reasons why me and my siblings did a lot of reading in our house. So again, we could go over to a friend's house, watch all the TV we wanted, but my parents in our house, that was a just not something we were going to do. And the sad irony to that is when we all grew up and moved out of the house, then my parents got a TV and we're like, why are you doing this? So anyway, and also a funny story about my dad. And for those, it's funny when people talk about BLM and racist and Antifa and all that kind of stuff. I can tell you, having grown up in a mixed race family, that, very real races, there are very real, actual racist people out there that are complete morons, that this guy doesn't look like this guy, so I'm not going to like this guy because he doesn't look this way. I experienced plenty of that. And having siblings that were that way, that drove me nuts when we would go someplace and I would see people be openly, overtly racist towards my siblings or to me because they were my siblings. And the funny thing about that, I never once thought, I experienced that a lot in public schools growing up. And I never once thought like, wow, I wish I was in a family that didn't have, different races of people in it. I thought, what kind of a-holes are judge people like that? Who does that? Who acts like that? And I have a pretty funny memory. Unfortunately, I was too little to really remember this, but my older sister was the one that told me about this. At one time, my dad, right after we moved to our house in Richardson, there were some kids making fun of my sister because she looked different, and just without any, that was literally the only criteria, is this girl looks different and we're going to make fun of her for it. It made her cry. She went to my dad and was like, oh, kids being stupid. And my dad was incredibly pissed by this. Like, who does this? This was like 1978 or so. And the kid was still out there being an a-hole. And my dad, when he saw my dad start to take off on his bike, and my dad literally ran down the street, grabbed him off of his bike by his collar, and told him, if you ever do that to my daughter again, what's going to happen to him? And that solved that. We never encountered that particular problem from that particular group again. And my dad, you can find some of his material. I think I have a playlist, Grand Bob or something like that. But my dad goes by the name Grand Bob now in his old age. And I have several videos of him on this channel telling stories about the Navy and that sort of thing. So I'll link that on the end screen. But more importantly, I want to link the new video about hypnosis and propaganda and just media studies in general on this. And there's just a lot there that I really highly recommend. I think studying television and just the way media works is really eye-opening on so many other topics. There's so many tactics employed in modern propaganda that once you figure out that loose thread and pull at it, a lot of stuff becomes self-explanatory. And one thing to notice, and this is fascinating how much this has changed just in my lifetime, is what's called a technical event. And I think there's a few different industry terms for a technical event or a jolt, or I think there might be a more modern term for it now. But anytime a television does something that you can't do, so you can't do a jump cut from looking at me right now to looking over at that wall. Or jump cut from looking at me to looking outside at the sunset. That's an impossible action for you to do. So that is a technical event or a jolt, because every time something like that happens, like if a title pops up on the screen, that's a technical event. If suddenly the camera zooms in on something, that's a technical event, something you can't mimic in reality. That would never happen naturally. You aren't going to suddenly zoom in on something out in a soccer field. So all those things, those technical events, they activate your fight or flight senses. They activate part of your head, your thinking, your subconscious, that says something just happened that's really important because it can't naturally happen. So I need to pay attention. So every time one of those technical events is put into programming, that has a jarring effect on your consciousness that says something unnatural just happened, I need to pay attention. And the more often those technical events are employed, the greater the pull is on your attention span. So back in the 70s on like public television, there were very few technical events because budgets were such they couldn't afford to do a lot of the fancy editing and cutting that we can do now. Whereas you watch commercial television, like commercials and like commercial television, commercial programming, and commercials, and I'm not giving NPR a pass, just saying PBS didn't have the budget to pull off a lot of this stuff. They had their own brand of propaganda that deserves its own special treatment. But when you watch how many technical events are in just a regular TV show, it's a lot. And again, it's designed to hold your attention in spite of the content you're watching. If something is properly edited, you can hold someone's attention watching someone eat a candy bar if it's properly edited. And then you notice when it switches to a commercial, because a commercial has zero reason to hold your attention, because literally someone trying to sell you something you didn't ask for. So you didn't ask to sit down and watch ads about Skittles, but there they are. So the Skittles ad has to jump it up tenfold and has to have way more technical events and graphics and all this crazy stuff to keep you sitting there when you were about to get up and walk into the other room and, grab a drink or go to the bathroom. Now, a lot of that's changed with modern programming. Now we have YouTube, we have Netflix and all this stuff that's these streaming services where it's much more difficult to rope people into ads, but it's important to pay attention to those psychological tricks that get you to watch an ad and stay focused on an ad. Because again, that is the gold standard of manipulation, is to get someone to watch something that they literally do not want to watch, something that they didn't ask for, have no intention of watching, but to get them to actually sit through it. So those skippable ads are a great test of your fortitude as a viewer of things, television and otherwise. So anyway, I know this is a long tirade on all this, but this is something that, again, the whole television rabbit hole is something I got pulled down just from a personal perspective, just having grown up without it. And then going over and watching friends. I remember I had a good friend growing up in grade school that right up until he passed away, we were great buddies. But the thing that would drive me nuts was he was a television addict. And I would go over to his house in grade school and just about have to pry him off the couch because that afternoon programming was so strong. If left unattended, he would sit there for a couple hours just watching whatever was on TV. And that's the crazy thing about the technical events, is if they're done right, you can get someone to sit there and watch just about anything and go, why am I watching this? I was watching Starsky and Hutch, and now suddenly I'm watching, a totally unrelated show that came on afterwards that I'm not really interested in, but here I am watching it. So anyway, and that's one of those things, definitely a lot of my friends and family now that hear my pitch about television and mass media, that if you can separate yourself from it, even just for a few weeks, when you see it again, it looks totally grotesque and totally different. So, those of you out there that are curious about just simple changes to better your life, cutting off television and mass media will definitely make things better. Now, in closing, so those of you curious that want to do some more digging about this stuff, definitely check the playlist at the end of this. But this has an excellent, lots of good information in this. Again, this cost me all of $3.99 at the Half Price Books. And again, I've seen this all over the place, but theta waves are one of the things that television is really good at inducing theta state. And theta is the portal for entering nighttime sleep. We all pass through theta twice a day, when we fall asleep and when we awaken in the morning. With hypnosis, we maintain theta for as long as the session lasts. At this level, behavior can be modified. But anyway, excellent material in this book. So this is definitely one of those that when I found this copy again, I've been going back through looking at some of the stuff again in it. Excellent for any of those of you looking into just parapolitical topics and all. having a good baseline knowledge of media and hypnosis and how all that works is incredibly helpful. So again, check on the end screen for the playlist for the media, hypnosis, and whatnot. And lately I've been going through trying to reorganize some of the playlists and make sure everything is updated so you can go through some of those playlists, because there will be times a lot of you will comment on a video and be like, hey, have you ever reviewed such and such? And a lot of those books I have already done, and I'll try to include a link on that, but some of these playlists, definitely go back through. I know some of the older content is not as polished, but definitely, check out some of those older reviews. And like this one, I know this is one I reviewed a long time ago, but still incredibly relevant. So again, as always, thanks for watching, and big thanks to the members. I appreciate your support of the channel, and I've got a lot of new stuff coming up, so bear with me. I'm at the mercy of the amount of hours in a day. So have a lot of new stuff that I don't want to talk about just yet until I've got it all in place. So again, big thanks to all of you, and thanks for watching.